right, 8 minutes before 11 o'clock, 8 tiny minutes to talk about this amazing book. It is called Prairie Fires. It is getting really good reviews all over the place, and Caroline Fraser is on the phone to talk to us about this. This is her book. Caroline is an editor, a journalist, a contributor to the New York Review of Books and the Atlantic, the New Yorker, the LA Times. You get the picture. She's got a lot of credentials. The American Dreams of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Now, do you think you know Laura Ingalls Wilder from the TV show?
Yeah, this is a wonderful book.
Feels like it, right? Caroline Fraser. Good morning, Caroline. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Tell me about this. I mean, do we get a different picture of Laura Ingalls Wilder from this book than we got from the TV show?
I think so, because that was really why I wanted to write it. I felt like the TV show, although it was wonderful in bringing a lot of people to the Little House books, really glossed over some of the harder aspects of her life. And so I wanted to give people an idea of who the real Laura Ingalls Wilder was and some of the history behind these books, which is fascinating in and of itself.
So does she give any of this information in her own writing? Do we know a little bit about Laura Ingalls Wilder simply from her own fiction?
Oh, yes, we know a tremendous amount, and she does talk about a lot of the struggles and terrors of trying to be a pioneer and farm on the Great Plains in the 1870s, including the terrifying locust plagues of the 1870s. That appears unforgettably in her books. But I think that not even Laura realized what a huge national disaster that was, even when she was writing about it. So it's interesting to look at the actual events and how they affected so many people throughout a quarter of the country, and to look at that a little bit more from a historical perspective.
And you also gave us, this book also gave us insight onto the younger children like Carrie growing up, because by the time, she was there, the series was winding down.
Yeah, and I think that I hope that Prairie Fires gives people a sense of the family as a whole and how difficult life was for farmers in that time, and how all of the kids really had to work to help support the family. This is one of the things about Laura's life that I think people don't always realize, that essentially from the age of 9, she began working at odd jobs and worked in a hotel and did all kinds of things to try to help support the family. And so did Carrie when her turn came.
So then the books, not only the books that she wrote, but the book you've written, also give us a better idea of what life was like for her. Would her experience be different than a young man her age? Was the male-female difference greater in her life than it would be in our generation?
Oh, sure. I mean, she obviously took the kinds of jobs that women were allowed to do at that time, one of which, of course, was to be a frontier school teacher, a prospect that really terrified her. She didn't want to teach as a teenager, but she felt that she had to do it to help support the family, and women were mainly in that field because most of the men were working as farmers and laborers and so forth. So you really see her kind of step up to the plate after her sister becomes blind and take on that challenge, which was so frightening to her because she really didn't like speaking in front of crowds or dealing with strangers.
And then you also, in the book, she also had the experiences with her family with the Native Americans, and they seemed to form a bond, whereas other white settlers were murdered.
Yeah, that's a where I start the book. Actually, is in a brief description of this event that she called the Minnesota Massacre. We actually know it now as the U.S. Dakota War of 1862, but it's so important to understand that event, both in terms of how it affected her life and her work, and really how it affected the development of the American West, because it gave the federal government an excuse to push the Plains Indians off of their land.
Was she squelched, is that the word, by the publishers, or could she pretty much write whatever she wanted?
She sometimes complained about, as writers so often do, about the way that things were edited. For one famous example of that is that the book The Long Winter, she wanted to call it by its actual name, which was The Hard Winter, but the publishers didn't like that because they felt for children that was too grim. So they made her change the title of that particular novel.
Oh, wow.
But I think in many ways she did have a free hand to write as she pleased, and the editors and publishers were thrilled by her skill at telling these stories.
And you also elaborated on the history of the violin or the fiddle that her dad played. I found that interesting, especially with the notes.
Yeah, he was a very gifted fiddle player, and was said to have been able to play a song even when he'd heard it just once, and new songs for every occasion. And I think Laura really inherited his storytelling gift and just the love of music, which plays such a big role in the Little House books. And their relationship, I think, is one of the relationships that's kind of at the core of her work, and of course of Prairie Fires as well.
The hardcover is currently number 1 on Amazon in the children's literary criticism category. It's also number 3 as the Kindle, and it's also number 4 as the audiobook. You're doing pretty good with this one. Caroline, thank you for coming on the air with us. I did find it on Amazon. I also have a copy. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to me. Caroline, before you say goodbye, do you have a website you can direct us to?
Yes, prairiefiresbook.com.
Okay. Excellent. prairiefiresbook.com. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Here is your 30-second news brief. A shooting in Ocala following a basketball game Tuesday night took the life of